Welcome to another edition of Chicago Crossing Model Railroad. It's me, Eric, here with you in the train room. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about a question that is important for justifying things that we put on a model railroad. And that question is, why is it there? What is it doing? You know, it's easy to take a look at prototypes and to say, oh, I'm going to put that onto the layout. That looks appropriate. And that's all good. It's part of the process. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And sure enough, I've identified a few different options as to what this pass-through building could actually be. But once you actually have something on the layout, it's actually really important to readdress the question of, why is this here? What is this thing supposed to really be? And what provides a compelling example of something that exists in context versus something that is contrived to be there? So the question is, what is this building? It's clear that this is just a sort of foundational structure. One could still imagine that this is a foundation for a warehouse that expands up from here and that has loading docks maybe over on this side. But it still begs the question, well, why did it have to be that way? Nothing on this layout is real. Some of it addresses or reflects prototype and spirit, and that's fine. That's what model railroading is supposed to be. So now we get to the point where we kind of have something that we think fits here. We have a mass, we have a structure, and once you put it in place, you can really start what I think is the hard but necessary work, which is identifying what really is this? What makes the most sense to be here? Is this even quite the right shape for a particular thing that we think is here? These are all worthwhile questions. As with the cardboard mock-up on the other side of the layout, this is the beginning of the conversation. It's not the build plan. And I think that's really important. It's why asking the question why, I think, is really important for having a good model railroad, and one that can at least reflect the spirit of reality without having a lot of contrivance. So if there's a good reason for this pass-through to be here, other than to simply blind a curve on the layout, well, then we'll figure out what that is. And yeah, that'll take a little bit more time, I think. Some of that is just a matter of building additional mock-ups and seeing how different things play in this space. Sure, but when you build a different mock-up, what is it that you're trying to mock up? That's really the question. And why is it there? Can we justify it in some universe where it kind of makes sense for that to be the case? You know, when I was in college in my first year, I was sort of majoring in theater. I had dreams of being an actor on stage. And I remember in introductory theater, one of my professors telling us that confusion is the core animator for creativity. In other words, from confusion springs ideas and creativity. You throw everything on the table and you start knocking things off in sequence as you go. And that was true in acting, when you are trying to identify, once again, the same question, why? Why does my character do this? Why does my character think this? Why is this the way it is? That's how you get to good acting. I think it's also how you get to good model railroading, is asking really simple, but in some cases, very challenging questions that keep you from just doing a thing in order to do a thing, and instead to do a thing in order to identify what it is that really works here. You know, you could imagine that this building is a city street or something like that, and that you have a certain mass of other structures that sit on top of it. And this is an example of something that would be essentially about a 3-story warehouse building. If we're talking about that previous idea, maybe it turns this way. And so you can put another piece of a mock-up on here, and you can look at this and you can say, once again, does this make sense? And you take the literal and you take the figurative zoom out, and you ask, how does this actually fit with the rest of the layout? Can we justify that there's some sort of building that's sitting on top of a pass-through here that starts here and terminates over there? Is this actually a case where this structure really should just go off and terminate on the horizon, with the idea that maybe there's a road here, and maybe that road even comes over here, and there's something that even I'm not really considering about a more complicated structure that moves cars this way or this way? So the moral of the story is, ask why. When you put something on the layout, or when you think you're going to put something on the layout, it's why stuff like this really is so valuable, is you get an opportunity to ask the simple, but sometimes very challenging from an artistic and from a rational standpoint, questions. All right, I'll leave you with that. Plenty going on here, so just a fun little bit to talk about. Have a good rest of the weekend.